Welcome to the Dairy News and Views podcast, a production of the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach Dairy Team. Our podcast covers current educational, research, and industry tools available for your operation to manage healthy cows and calves while producing the highest quality dairy products.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Dairy News and Views from the ISU Dairy Team. I'm Dr. Gail Carpenter, the Assistant Professor and State Dairy Extension Specialist with Iowa State University. And today I'm here with my Extension Dairy Team colleagues, Jen Bentley, Northeast Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, and Fred Hall, Northwest Iowa Dairy Field Specialist, as we discuss today's topic. And I am as excited to find out about today's topic as the rest of you, because I don't know what it's going to be. Normally, you hear Jen here at the front introducing everybody, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to hear more from Fred and Jen about what they've been working on, what's been on their mind, what they're seeing in the dairy industry recently. So I'll start by asking Fred, what's been on your mind these days?
Well, I'm sitting here looking at the CME. We've got the next 3 months below $17. Actually, December is down at $16.14 for Class 3 milk. Then we have a couple of months below 18. And if you look out to next December, we don't touch $18.50. Yeah, that's not pay price. I understand that. But it sure leads the parade in a lot of ways. So that's number one thing that I think, I spend a lot of hours I should be sleeping thinking about, okay, how do we create margin when your pay price is, way below your cost of production? The other thing that I spend a lot of time trying to keep track of is the hearings for our federal milk marketing order. We're making some changes, obviously, at least having a discussion about changes. And the big word we hear a lot is transparency. And sometimes I listen to the conversation, I think, transparency must be protecting our processors' bottom lines. And then I hear the next person, and no, it must be protecting the dairyman's ability to stay in business. And, I think it has to be both sides of that coin. If our processors can't make money, they're going to go out of business. If our dairy farms can't make money, they're going to go out of business. So, yeah, that tends to be on my mind as I get phone calls and talk with producers. Pretty technical stuff. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd start us out on a high note, but so what does transparency mean? Are we talking about transparency with prices? What transparency do we have now, and what's kind of being recommended?
Well, the discussion is, okay, how do we figure make allowances? That's what the processor has to have to deduct out of the dairyman's check so they can cover their costs. Well, there's a wide discrepancy there. If you have a new, highly efficient plant, and I'll use, since you're a Michigander, the Bath plant, brand new, double dual everything, very efficient, versus the plant at, some places in Iowa that were built in the 50s and been remodeled. They don't have the same efficiencies. And the discussion is, okay, how do we allocate a make allowance with that kind of broad efficiency base? So that's, as I'm interpreting it, that's kind of one of the big transparency issues.
So what should dairy producers be thinking about right now? Looking at, $30 milk's probably not coming back anytime soon, it sounds like. So what should producers be thinking about right now as they're looking ahead to these next few months?
Well, what I'm telling producers is, let's look at margin. We know what the milk's going to be worth. Now, how can we make our input costs cheaper, less intrusive on our margin. Does that mean we have to look at some new forage sources? Is corn silage going to be higher and higher? I know you and I had talked at a webinar about 70% forages. Are we going to have to be looking at some of these high quality corn stalks? Maybe you have always worked with high quality rolled up stalks, but when I see the tests on some of these, I'm just impressed. Maybe we need to start looking at how we can get that forage and have our cost of production reduced. The next thing I think we have to do is start really thinking about capital investments. What do we want to have on our farm 5 years? We want it to still be there. If we're really fighting labor issues, is it time to start thinking about how do we include technology? Is it time to look at a robot? Maybe start with keeping the feed pushed up. We know if a cow can't reach the feed or the bunk's empty, she's not going to milk. So maybe that's something that we can put in place and make the operation bleed less, even though we've had a capital expense. So yeah, I think we've got to look at things a little different than maybe we have. My best example is always, this isn't probably this time to get that shiny new $80,000 pickup when the old pickup for $1,000 can do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I might even add to your capital investment potential list to think about. Maybe it's time to start thinking about investing in feed storage as well. You mentioned that high cost of feed and the benefit of those high quality forages. But if feed's blowing away in the wind, or if we're losing forages to spoilage, or if we're experiencing feed shrink, that can pay off. Some investment in some feed storage can pay off pretty quickly when feed prices are as high as they are right now. So that's the one thing I think I'd tag on the end of your list.
Well, and not necessarily just storage, but if you think about what's going in the mixer wagon, the most expensive ingredients are real light and real fine. So if you're dumping, soybean meal into the mixer wagon in a 10-mile-an-hour wind, look on the leeward side. It kind of turns a little gold colored, and that's all that expensive stuff that's blown past the target. So yeah, having a windbreak, a covered area, and closed area to mix feed, that's really important. I think guys can benefit a lot by figure out how we can change that.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point. And just thinking about that, Fred and Gail, it's really not herd size dependent either, right? Because we used to think, I'm too small to have some type of feed storage setup, but really it can be those small things like a windbreak, or what kind of storage are you putting certain feedstuffs in? So it's really not herd size dependent on keeping those feeds at good quality.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I dived into the weeds real quick. Jen, uplift us.
What's on your mind, Jen?
All right. Well, I gotta think of something more uplifting. Okay. Well, Gail, we've been out on farms for the last couple of weeks doing heifer growth data with some producers. And as I've been traveling on those farms, it's really gotten me thinking about just our whole demographic of Iowa's dairy industry and what it looks like. Not to date myself, but when I started in 2010 with Extension, there was close to 2,000 dairy farms. And now what are we at? We're just shy of 730 farms. So our our landscape has changed as far as what our dairy farms look like, but yet not really, because we were on herd sizes of all sizes, right? From
Yeah.
80 cow dairies to I think we were up to close to 1,000 cow dairies.
Mhm.
So I think there's still opportunity, and that's the positive thing, is there's opportunity for all herd sizes to be profitable and sustainable even in these times, right?
Mhm.
So kind of just thinking about that, as well as just overall heifer growth is another thing that I was thinking about. And we started this project wanting to weigh heifers, and we thought, oh, this will be pretty simple to get out on farm and weigh heifers. And
Yeah, we were so young and naive back then.
we were so wrong.
A year ago.
I think we've learned a lot about efficiency.
Yep.
And I think that's been an important lesson in what we've been doing, is being creative in how we can weigh heifers, and still trying to provide some valuable data that producers can take back and look at heifer growth. So Fred, you were talking about being more efficient, and I think just on the heifer end, how do we become more heifer efficient with whether that's facilities, or we look at our breeding program, because there's the buzzword about dairy beef right now. So how do we balance our heifer inventory with all those other options of what we could be doing with our young stock?
Well, and I think that's where your expertise becomes very valuable in times like this, Jen, because when we're looking at, milk prices aren't where we want them to be right now. But we can start impacting 2 years down the road what that looks like by just starting with the basics with those little calves. And I think we forget about that when we're investing in our calf health and investing in our calf nutrition and management, and making sure we're doing the very best job that we can with those heifers, that we're setting ourselves up for 2 years down the road. We have a more resilient herd that can kind of handle more of these economic ups and downs. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I would totally agree with that. And then, just maximizing milk production too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're getting our heifers bred, either by looking at body weight and age, that's going to ultimately benefit the bulk tank in 2 years down the road, and hopefully benefit the income stream.
Yeah, it's one of those positive feedback loops, right? Because then you're setting those cows up for success, and then they can have healthier heifers, and then when those heifers calve in, they're going to be the next best thing in your herd then too. So it's you start now, and it's one of those things that just keeps paying off and just keeps paying off.
Yeah, I was going to say, we all want a silver bullet, but a lot of times it's very parochial what makes a big influence in your herd production. I'll use the example of just standing in the barn and seeing, are my cows laying down the way they're supposed to? Have I not tended the bedding? Have I got the sand where it needs to be? Have we got the cows, when they're not eating, they're not being milked, they're drinking, are they laying down and making milk? And it's amazing. You walk into some barns and you see a lot of cows standing in the aisle, and that's when you start looking to see, okay, what can I do different to fix that?
Yeah, you can't outfeed bad management, right? You can't, if your cows aren't getting their time allotment, their resting time and their eating time, and if they're spending too much time on their feet, you have lameness issues, and it doesn't matter how perfect your ration's balanced. It doesn't matter how perfect you're following all of your protocols in the parlor or with repro, but if your cows aren't comfortable, you're not going to reach their full genetic potential.
Exactly. I'm going to circle back to Jen's comment about how we've lost dairies. And yet when we look at the ag census, we've got far more herds milking less than 10 cows. And these small micro dairies need good information. They tend to be the ones who, I'm milking 3 cows for home milk and home cheese. And they may or may not have had the experience of grandpa's dairy at some point in their young life. So they go to Facebook, or they go to one of these places where it may or may not be a good information source. So as we move into 2024, we're going to see promotion of the Urban Cow program, and that's specifically for these small homestead type dairies, and hopefully we can be of service to that part of our dairy industry.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that we're turning our backs on large dairies either, though, right, guys? I think none of us would think that. One of the fun parts to me about working in extension is that we get to serve farms of all sizes, because every producer in Iowa is a taxpayer, so we are here as extension professionals to serve all of them. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 cows or 10,000 cows. We are at your service, and I think that's a lot of fun. Actually, it keeps my job exciting anyway.
Exactly.
And I think, Jen, you kind of mentioned that too, is we've been going around weighing heifers, so we've seen farms that come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's just fun to see the creative management practices and, the sharing of ideas of how you can set up a certain facility or manage it a certain way. So it's just not a cookie cutter type operation, right? And so that makes it fun.
I'm always amazed by our dairy farmers and what they can do. They're very creative and resilient people.
Yep, exactly. But we do like, the milking shorthorn herds real well.
I have a soft spot for the Ayrshire herds.
There we go.
Jen, what's your favorite breed?
Oh, what's my favorite breed?
Yeah, we've never put you on the spot like this.
Well, growing up, I would say Brown Swiss, just because that was my FFA project. I always had Brown Swiss, and I worked on a Brown Swiss herd. And then when I worked on another farm, it became Jersey, and I think I've really stuck with Jerseys.
They are a hoot.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent description. They are.
Yes. They're both very different breeds. They're kind of opposite in terms of their, a lot of things, actually. I was going to say personality, but also just phenotype. I guess they're pretty opposite to each other. So, but they both make, in my opinion, the cutest calves.
Yes.
So, Gail, do we get to ask you the same question, or was the question only for us?
Oh, I thought I was running this interview.
Plot twist.
I think what's been on my mind lately, and Jen, you and I have been traveling around together, so I think we've been probably some of the same things are on each other's mind. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is record keeping and the value of keeping good records, but not just keeping good records, but doing it in a way that's consistent. And I think a lot of times we have a tendency to maybe want to record everything or write everything down, but if you can't keep on top of it and find something that you can stick to, it doesn't do a whole lot of good in the long run. So I've been, when I was in industry before I came here, one of the main things that I did in my job was do records analysis for herds that our nutritionists worked on. And look through their dairy comp and PC Dart and give some of that information back to the herds and back to the nutritionists that we had working for us. And so that's been part of what I've been enjoying about this heifer growth project, is getting to look through some of that herd data and do a little bit more of that, because it's something that I really enjoy and I've been missing. So I'll just put a plug in for if you're a dairy farmer in Iowa, that's a skill set that I have, and that's something that I do enjoy. So feel free to reach out if you want somebody to help you look through that stuff. I get the question occasionally, like, yeah, I record this, but I don't know why. And I am happy to help you with that. So,
and I think there's a lot of that happens where we've always kept this data and don't know why, never use it, but it's there. So you collect what you're going to use. That's the key.
I was going to say, I think that ties back into what you were talking about with the capital investment in technology, Fred. I think when you're making some of those decisions, that's an important thing to think about too, is how will I use this data? Because unfortunately, occasionally we'll see somebody who invests in heat monitoring or activity monitoring equipment and don't check it or don't follow up when they have cows that are alerted. And if you're gonna make that investment in that technology, and I think it is worth it for a lot of farms, but you got to make sure that you're actually going to use it. Otherwise, it's just throwing money down a pit.
Yeah, so I was just going to put a plug in for our dairy days because, record keeping will be one of our topics when we have Greg Pallas with DRMS coming out to kind of walk through some of those software programs that are available. I'm just really looking forward to understanding more about, how you can better utilize the data that you're already putting into that program to make better decisions.
Yeah, that herd HQ stuff that they've been working on, for those of you who have PC Dart herds, that's a really cool tool set. We had a chance at one of our professional developments to play with that, and I've been beta testing it a little bit with some of our Iowa State data as well, and it's pretty neat. It's pretty powerful what it can do. So I'm also looking forward to that. All right, well, I think we hit on a lot of interesting topics. So any last thoughts before we let you guys go today?
I think if folks are interested, from what our discussion was today, get signed up for Dairy Days. I think there's a lot of herds that can get a lot of benefit from what discussions, and it's not just the presentations, it's that across the table discussions that I know I enjoy and get a lot out of.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dairy Days is a good time of year, and I always enjoy it. I always come away, I've spoken at Dairy Days a couple times now, and I always feel like I come back with more information than I started with, even though we put the program together and we're the speakers. It's just, it's always interesting to hear what our producers are telling us that they're seeing and their thoughts out there.
Yeah, and I would just mention for those listeners, if you don't know our emails individually, we do have a dairy team email now. So if you just have a question that you want to email to our dairy extension group, you can use dairyextension@iastate.edu, and you'll get one of us responding to your questions. So I think that's been a really good, useful tool for our team, just to have one email sometimes too.
And it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
dairyextension@iastate.edu. Well, Jen and Fred, thanks for joining us today. And thanks everyone for listening. We look forward to visiting with you more on the next Dairy News and Views from ISU.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or combination inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/EXT.